think one problem that commercial artists have is they're required to be, well, to have a very high success rate. When you're hired to do a job and there's only a certain amount of time to do it and you're being paid good money to do it, a client expects you to perform. And I think most people work, or they develop a way of working that is highly reliable, and that is a requirement of the job. But I think it's a bit limiting toward getting better at your craft, because all processes are being pruned off, and you're getting narrower and narrower as you go through time. Say for instance, we start with a line drawing, and you start with the darks first, and then you model middles and work edges. There are a lot of different ways of working. You can see in magazines and DVDs about how different people go about things, and the pressure is always on limiting and making and pruning off things that are less reliable, because that is the nature of the business. So I think that it is really important to schedule time to utterly fail, and that can be in front of other people in a live class, or it should be done at home too. That if something is not going to work, you want to have that fail when nobody's looking, of course. Well, I mean, not that you'd be embarrassed, but of course you shouldn't be embarrassed, but you just can't afford to do it on somebody else's nickel. So how wacky should you be when you're experimenting with these things? Well, you should be as strange as you possibly can, and realize that only a very small percentage of things that work are going to eventually make it back into your production work routine. Experimenting with real media, experimenting with procedural shape generation. Try to break the pipeline of what you have been taught. Say, for instance, I was always taught when you're painting something, you need to have a 1, 2, 3 read, meaning a very strong contrast between what is in light and what is in shadow. And you always start with the big forms first and go to the smaller forms. And I think that's a really good way of working. It's, as I say, it's very reliable, but because you're always doing the same thing, you're always going to come up with kind of the same results, because the process stamps itself on the finished product inevitably. You can't get around that. So one way of breaking out of that is to work in two different ways. One is simple sketches, and one is in very finished work. So if we have the finished work is over here and the sketches are here, and if we break this process down from end product, starting, end product, and here are the different steps that you would go along the way. You have thinking about it here, sketching it out there, working in more detail, and as this progression goes, the secret of the sketch is that you do it multiple thousands of times, so that you go over and over and over and over. So what you're doing is you're getting an idea of how the decisions that you make back here affect what comes out here. And when you're doing this over and over, you begin to see. So next time you do a sketch, maybe down here at number 6947, you see that I'm sketching this out, and I know if I do this, it's going to have this implication at this stage here. And you'll begin to modify how you're doing that. Now that's the importance of doing many, many sketches, because you know how this flow, how the different stages affect what is in the end. And also, sketches is a very good way of doing as I say, experimentations in thought. Not really media experimentations, but experimentations in conceptually how you go about making images. Now the finishes, of course, that is because eventually, as a commercial artist, all this stuff you're doing over here has to eventually show up over here. But if you only do finished work, are you really going to get this feedback loop going and really understand how the early stages of something affect what is at the end stage? No, because you're going to turn out, what, 10 paintings a year or something? So when you start out a painting, it's you're not really going to know how the beginning stages affect the end. And beginning something, the basic design, you're set up to either succeed or fail in that. And you have to get that right. If you get really, really good at figuring out how the stuff in the beginning affects things at the end, well, that opens up a wide variety of different ways of working. Possibly you could start with a detail. Like if I were painting this head, so I might start painting an eye first. Of course, probably cheating by getting these bigger shapes in here first. But I could do something like, well, let's make something a bit higher. 6,000 by 4,000. Now I'm going to just make some shapes. But what am I not doing here? I'm not getting rid of the white of the canvas. And I could immediately, it looks like some type of valley with could be a little house here. And maybe I put that on a separate level so I can paint what's behind there more easily. You see what I'm doing here is I'm breaking just about every rule that I have for myself, which what I would be telling you is to work the whole canvas together, get the overall basic design going before you get into detail, and I would pound that into your head. That's probably what you've heard at art school too. But that's what's nice about doing lots of sketches, because as I'm doing this, I've done a lot of sketches, I kind of know where I'm going with this because I've done it before. So that allows me to completely turn the process that everybody's had drilled into their head in art school on its ear and start with a little corner and start detailing out something, because having this, relating the smaller pieces and being patient and really getting into something like this, I can then see you'll create relationships that are very different, because this process is so different than traditional process. The end result is going to be different than if I had done it this way, which is big shapes. So that's I hope I made my point about the importance of doing many, many sketches to understand how the different steps will affect later steps. And once you've mastered that, then you're more free to experiment with different conceptual ways of working. Another aspect that I forgot to mention about the idea of, or how sketches and finished work support one another. A sketch is simply a simplified version of a finished work. You can say, okay, what is the difference between them? You could say that a sketch is more simplified. It is. Is it less accurate? Is it inaccurate? The way I look at a sketch is, no, it's not. Anything that you paint in there, you are responsible for and needs to be well done. As I said, the reason for doing finished work is because, well, that is the end result of all this, but also it is increasing your sensitivity for what something really needs to look like. And it's very difficult to simplify it, or to, if you understand something and have done a highly finished, say, head, it's far easier to simplify that head and sketch it in a variety of different ways if you really understand that. And working and doing a highly finished object, you'll learn what is important about it, and you'll be able to sketch it easier and better.